Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see folks starting to join in on the session. It's wonderful to see some familiar names popping in, and we will give folks a couple of minutes to join here. If you're just joining us, if this is your first Customer Success Unlocked that you're joining, or you're a returning guest, we always love to know where people are calling in from. Pop it in the chat. Where are you located? Welcome, everyone. So let's see, got people in Nebraska, Pittsburgh. Jay, I know you're in Charleston. Awesome.
All over the world.
Everybody. All over the world.
Great.
Dubai, I love it. What time is it there?
Yeah, late.
Really late. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everybody. So happy to have you all. Well, I know folks are still rolling in here.
Christina, Fort Lauderdale. Hey.
Hey, Christina. Yeah.
Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started as folks are continuing to roll in. Want to make the most of our time today. So welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us for Customer Success Unlocked. I'm Marley Wagner. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Digital Customer Success here at ESG. I'd love to welcome you to our webinar titled, You Already Have a Customer Community, Are You Cultivating It? As usual, I will be serving as your host today alongside my co-moderator, ESG's VP of Customer Success, Peter Armley. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Marley. Hey, everybody.
So Peter and I have been really especially excited and looking forward to this session and chatting with our guest today. Before I introduce him, I want to just cover a couple of very quick housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded, and you will receive that recording in your email inbox within 24 hours of the session. Second, reminder that today's conversation, like most of our webinars, will be a fireside chat style interview. So you won't be seeing slides on your screen, but I promise your Zoom is working just fine as long as you can see our faces and hear our voices. That's all you need to do. And lastly, we invite you all and encourage you all to submit questions throughout the session today. Please use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. We may throw them into our conversation throughout, or we'll save them for the end and get to as many as we possibly can. So with that out of the way, I want to introduce our wonderful guest. So excited to have you, the one and only Jay Nathan, Chief Customer Officer at Higher Logic and founder of Gain, Grow, Retain. Welcome, Jay. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Always good to see you, Marley and Peter.
Hey, Jay.
We're super excited that you're joining us today to talk about communities, right? And we know that the term community can have a lot of different meanings for people, right? In our day-to-day lives, in our business lives. And so I want us to kick off today by defining what we're talking about. So can you start by just giving us a definition of what we mean when we say community in this context of a community platform?
Yeah. Great question. Well, it's good to see everybody. I've seen so many people that I know from LinkedIn and meeting in person. Peter and I got to meet for the first time in person last week in Orlando, which is awesome. Missed you, Marley, but we'll do it next time in Vegas, I hope. But yeah, so what is community? I mean, we all know what communities are because we live in them, we interact in them, we have different communities. But when you think about customer communities, it's really a place where you have a group of people that have common interests and common problems to solve, common career aspirations. Another element of it is a place where people look out for each other's outcomes. They look out for the best interests of the people that are in that community, the other members with them. I do have a personal favorite example, which is Gain, Grow, Retain. And I think many people here maybe know what that is, but Gain, Grow, Retain is a customer success leadership community. We started right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we could talk about that more later. But communities are all around us. The interesting thing is, and we'll get into this, I think, is that every company has a community around it that can help you drive your business forward. So how you leverage that is a really, really important thing. And I'm learning a lot about it and excited to share a little bit about what I've learned and see what others are learning as well.
So it looks like we're segueing already, Jay, because that's exactly what we want to talk to you about, because that's the premise of this webinar, right? Is identifying the customer community that you already have in existence by what you're doing in the market. And whether you realize it or not, you have a customer community. So we just want to understand what your thoughts are on this topic.
Yeah. So what do we mean by that? Every company, every technology company, if you're B2B SaaS, B2C company, doesn't matter. You have a community, people who care about your brand. So it's your users of your product. It's the people who buy your product, because a lot of times those are different than your users, right? It's your partners, people who are consultants in your industry. It's your employees, not just your customer success team, but your product team, your engineering team, your support team, your sales team. All these people care about your brand in some way. And an ecosystem of these people is where, there's a value, there's an exchange of value happening with a business. That's the reason we all exist as a business. There has to be two-way value. We talk about all the time in customer success. So, you've got all these people that are interested and they care about, their outcomes. They care about how you can help them achieve their outcomes. And so that's why I say every business has a community around it already. It's got an ecosystem. And one of the biggest opportunities that we have is to just embrace that ecosystem, to leverage it to help drive growth. And the most successful businesses you see in the world are already doing that, whether you call it community or whether you call it marketing or whether you call it customer experience or customer success. The best companies that are growing the fastest are doing this today. Does that make sense?
I think that's so true, Jay. And I think that's such a good point. I said this to you, as we were prepping for the call, but you and I were having a conversation, I don't know, a month or two ago about something totally different. And you said just that. You were like, everybody already has a community. Every company already has a community, whether you're paying attention to that or not. And like, I certainly had a light bulb moment when you said that. And so, that's really why we wanted to talk about that in particular, and talk about, cultivating and formalizing, a community that already exists, right?
Yep.
And I know you've seen immense success in doing that with the customer success community and Gain, Grow, Retain. So would you talk a little bit about some lessons you've learned through that process that you think others listening may benefit from?
Yeah, definitely. And we started Gain, Grow, Retain, and I was not the founder. I was a co-founder along with Jeff Brunsbach, who was my business partner at the time and still works with me at Higher Logic. But so I want to give credit where credit's due. He's the brains of the outfit. Not that everybody doesn't already know that. I'm just going to make it clear.
Of course, but gotta give credit to Jeff for sure.
But GGR is an industry community, right? It's open to the public. It's free. It's for customer success leaders who are trying to solve specific problems. It was really formed at the beginning of the pandemic when we were all running around with our hair on fire, trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do with our customers? How do we give them flexibility in their contracts? How do we engage them? How do we just keep them with us through this next period so that they'll be with us in the long run? But a few things that we learned in the process, some of this is just mentality that we walked into it with, and some of it we learned along the way. But lesson number one for us was always give value before you expect it in return. So whether that's content, whether it's knowledge, whether it's a personal connection to somebody who can help someone else in their career, give value before you take it from somebody. I think, again, that's also a marketing and sales mentality that you see in the world today, is just, the companies that give before they ask you to buy something. You're just much more you're much more inclined to buy something from those companies that are giving you value ahead of time. Number two is make your members the stars of your community. So we talk about, in community parlance, we talk a lot about ambassadors or MVPs, but in the Gain, Grow, Retain community, we found that there were a certain set of people who would always speak up with super intelligent things on our live calls. They would contribute inordinately online. They would offer to do extra things. And what we ended up adopting something, we didn't make it up, but we adopted this term of being the DJ, not the talent. So when you're running a community, it's about finding the people who can give that value to the other community members and giving them a platform to do that. And we've done that with a bunch of folks in the Gain, Grow, Retain community. And we get emails all the time that are like, hey, the opportunities that we've gotten to to show what we know and to grow in the community have really helped me advance my career, helped me get my next job. So that kind of thing. So make your members the stars. Engage. Number 3 is engage in like multiple channels, multiple different ways. So what I like to say that Gain Grow Retain actually started on LinkedIn. We've been very active on LinkedIn, not talking about what we were selling at the time or what we even sell today, which I work for Higher Logic and we sell a platform called Higher Logic Vanilla, which is a community software platform, but we don't talk about that very much on LinkedIn. We talk about the problems that the people that are looking to utilize our platform or that we're looking to sell to, that they have. And by that, we generate discussion, and they come to us when they're ready. They know who we are as a result of that. So, but I look at LinkedIn as the ultimate community, right? It's huge. It's the place that you can go engage with a lot of people, diverse opinions, and really understand the zeitgeist of what's going on in the world. So we added a podcast soon after that. We had weekly live calls that started in March, which I referenced earlier. We still run those today. In fact, we have like 2 or 3 calls a week that we now run for different parts of the different audiences within the community. Live expert events where we would have a webinar style expert event where people present a topic and go deep on it rather than just high level conversation. We're piloting small groups now, right? Where you have live calls, but with a smaller group of people that hang together as a group for a year or 2 years or 3 or however long they want to, right? And it's really up to them. You can think of it as like a user group concept around customer success. So what you find, so we have over 8,000 members in this community, active members in the community itself, and then many, many more on LinkedIn that we engage with, every week as we, cultivate conversation. But it takes continuous work. This is probably lesson number 4. It just takes continuous work to keep drawing people in, keep them participating and giving them value so that they continue to engage and help the community grow. So there's a lot there. We could probably talk for days about this, but those are a few things that are top of mind for me. What sticks out the most to you all out of everything I just said there?
Are you asking Marley and I?
I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah.
Back at us. I like it. I mean, for me, it's the value thing, right? To your point, Jay, we talk about that in sales and marketing world all the time. I saw an interesting infographic on LinkedIn, to your point, this morning about how, 90% of a buyer's journey is going to be stuff that they can access, value that you can provide to them without them talking to a salesperson, right? Yep. So same kind of concepts apply in so many different places of our business. That resonates huge with me. How about you, Peter?
Send me that article when you get a chance.
I will.
Yeah, the value obviously was a big thing that popped out of what Jay was saying, but also I like what he said about not selling. And I would love to get back to that, hopefully in this next 40 minutes or so, if we can touch on that. Yeah. Because I think that's a power of a real community, is when people check their egos at the door. And maybe this ties into the next question I want to ask, Jay, is that a lot of companies have multiple communities. In particular, I guess the enterprise companies have been at this for a while. I mean, I remember working at a vendor 15 years ago, and we had a community of customer. It was kind of rudimentary, but it worked sufficiently enough. So how do you, what are your thoughts on helping people understand how you can help connecting the dots between multiple communities? And not to say one group like support or marketing or customer success needs to own it, but what are your thoughts on how companies should think about connecting the dots of communities?
Yeah, it's the interesting thing here is that community concepts, the idea of gathering multiple people together, getting multiple voices in a discussion, apply to so many different things. And actually, there's an anonymous question here too about trying to understand where community falls, whether it be customer success or marketing or support or product, who owns this thing. But what we typically find is that there's one part of the organization that will sort of latch on to this idea before anybody else. A lot of times it's support. They see the value in crowdsourcing answers to common questions from people who are practitioners day to day. You don't have to wait, right? So an online community in many cases, especially maybe communities that were started 10, 15 years ago, started around that premise, right? They were support communities really meant to help scale the support organization, reduce the influx of cases and support tickets. They call it deflection, right? Where you were deflecting cases because people were getting answers before they got somebody on the phone or in an email. So, that's a good starting place. But then we see marketing teams taking a big interest in this, because what they're seeing is what we sort of just talked about, right? The buyer's journey. This is another thing we talked about, Marley, on our last call. The buyer's journey is largely done before anybody talks to your sales team, right? They may be looking at your marketing messages, but they're really talking to their peers. They're talking to other users of your products. They're getting all the information they need to know whether you're going to be able to do it for them or not before they even pick up the phone to talk to you. And it's a very small percentage of time that they spend with you versus the community,
right,
trying to get their answers. So I think, for that reason, you see marketing taking a big interest in who are the people that in the support community are providing the best answers. Those are your advocates, right? Those are the people that are going to defend your brand in public when somebody asks them the question. So why don't we put them on a pedestal, give them the platform to be out there so that they're already out there telling your story when other prospects come knocking, right? So I think, there's use cases that go across all sort of stages of the life cycle. There's onboarding, there's value realization and optimization, which is what we talk about a lot after your onboarding is complete, before your first renewal, after your first renewal. And so how do we, getting people involved with the community from every part of the customer journey really allows you to help, drive that as a fundamental part of the way you engage with your customers across the board.
Yeah. And, again, I think that makes total sense. Of course, different departments, different phases of the customer journey are going to find similar value in that, in those premises. That being said, the best in class at Community, what does that look like? Is there a department that owns it and other departments, play a role? What does that look like in a sort of best of breed scenario?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing most often these days is that it's either the CMO or the CCO that are owning it. And under the CCO, you typically have things like support and customer success and professional services. So if it starts in support, then the CCO usually owns it, right? If it starts as a marketing community, then marketing typically owns it. So, CCOs are seeing this as more of an opportunity to scale their customer success. Excuse me, I'm throwing things. Their customer success motion, and so more and more you see CCOs actively taking a part in this, especially as customer marketing comes into their scope, which is happening in some companies today. So best in class is really CMO or CCO, as far as I can tell today.
All right, we have an audience question that's just a quick follow-up to that I think is an interesting one. Have you ever seen customer education owning Community?
Well, it's an integral part of it. So yes, and again, like customer education can own it. If it doesn't exist, they can be the catalyst for getting it in place. So you all asked about platform earlier. Part of the idea of a customer community is that is your central hub for all customer engagement. So for learning and enablement, for support, for just knowledge sharing through a knowledge base, through peer-to-peer connections, it all sort of comes together as a central hub. So when you start looking at these platforms, you want to find something that can handle integrating all those pieces. There's not a one solution fits all provider for all those pieces, but everybody should integrate, right, with as much as possible so that you can provide a one-stop shop for your customers. At the TSIA event last week that Peter and I were at, and Marley was supposed to be at, we had people from customer education come up from our customers who they didn't realize they had a community already, and they were already our customers, and they got so jazzed about the possibilities when they started looking at it. And these are, VPs of learning and enablement for customer orgs that they have a big job to do, right? Which is make sure that the customers are well educated so that they can adopt the software and the solutions that they provide. So yeah, we see a lot of energy out of training and enablement teams for sure.
And Pam, thanks for asking that question. I knew I could count on you for asking about customer education.
Was that Pam? Was that
Yeah,
Pam? Okay.
it
Hi,
was.
Pam.
Yeah. So, Jay, I feel I want to ask a question that's asked by Anonymous, and I think it's the same Anonymous because they're two related questions, but I think they're asking the same thing. What about non-customers and non-employees? I mean, I have an opinion, but I think you're probably a lot more in tune with what best practice could be or should be. So I'm interested in what your thoughts are on including non-customers.
Well, yeah, fantastic question. Depends on what you want to do. So we have Gain Grow Retain, right, which is a non-customer community. That's I think of it as an industry community. You can have a community platform that has both an industry section, so it's open to the public, and then has private areas that are open only to your users that focus on product issues, product resolutions, ideation on your product. So if you don't want to make all that public, and a lot of companies worry about that,
yeah.
and I understand that. But if you don't want to make all of that public, you don't have to if you have the right community platform. So it really depends on how, remember, we're talking about giving value here to users, because what's the sense of having a community unless you have engaged members? You have to have enough value to offer those audiences to keep them coming back, to make it worth your while to do it. So my answer to that is, from a technology standpoint, it's pretty easy to do both. The question is a strategy question. Do you want to open up an industry community to bring people in that are not yet your customers, in the hopes that one day they will be, because they're associated with your brand, because you're giving them value?
Okay, that makes good sense. That makes great sense. And it's not quite related, but in my mind, it kind of extends it a little bit. And I'm thinking about what are the common misperceptions people have about communities. And I'd like you to think about it in the context of leadership in particular, I would say.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would dovetail it too with the whole idea of CS leaders in particular, because I know that's our primary audience here. This whole idea of scaled customer success, I don't think it's a misconception. I just don't think we think about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're thinking way too much like point to point, one-to-one kind of interactions.
Yeah.
And, at some point we could talk about the economy right now. We could talk about, what we've been through with COVID, but at some point you have to think non-linearly. How do you scale and engage with as many customers as possible? What we have found is that companies will adopt a one-to-many strategy, right, of communication and engagement and peer-to-peer networking with their long tail of customers. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, like your smaller customers, long tail. But what you end up finding is that when you employ those strategies, guess who else comes to the party? The tier 2s, the tier 1s, the larger customers get value from that too. So I think of community as the tide that lifts all boats. And so what I want customer success leaders to consider is not, I don't think they have a misconception. I think they get it when we talk about it, but I want CS leaders to consider how you can do more with a digital engagement strategy that starts at the bottom and works its way up, right? Starts broad, and then you layer in human interaction when it makes sense to have a human interaction. Don't do that by default.
Yeah, and maybe some of that misperception comes from just historical kind of context, in that, a lot of communities were led by marketing. And so people saw it as an opportunity for companies just to kind of not just extend their brand, but to harvest leads and all that kind of stuff. So maybe it's just a part of our evolution as communities roll out more and more. We get better at kind of refining the value of it and what best practices are. Right? Yeah.
Well, can I interject one more thing?
Oh, for sure.
I think the thing you have to really be careful of there is, if you're going to build an external community, an industry community, you have to be very thoughtful about how you target those people. If you do Gain Grow Retain, just so everybody knows, that database is as far as from the east from the west is from our marketing database at Higher Logic. And we do that intentionally because we don't ever want people to think that they got into this community and now they're getting marketing messages from our company. That's not what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So I think that's a really good point you made, Peter, because a lot of communities that originate in marketing have that intention, and that's cool as long as that's the expectation that the member has when they came in.
Yeah, and yeah, as the member has, they know that's the quid
Yeah.
pro quo and all that kind of stuff. So
Yep. Yep. One other misconception I point out quickly is that you don't really have to have a platform to get started driving community. We have a weekly call with some of our customers that we just launched, and it's like a small group call, right? A CSM could do this with their book of business. Find 5 customers that have a similar problem. Again, remember my definition of community: people that have a similar problem to solve. Bring them together, facilitate a discussion. In the end, you will benefit as a CSM, as a company, for bringing people together.
A great point, Jay. You know, we tend to think about communities as this like very complex technical thing with a platform, and that's, you know, that's the goal of the end state, but it doesn't mean you have to start there. I think that's a really, really good point. Yeah.
Yep.
So okay, I want to talk really quickly about a data point that we all saw last year. So every year, ESG and Higher Logic and our friends at Turn Zero do an annual CS leadership study. And in last year's study, so this was 2021, but only 28% of respondents from that study said they use any kind of customer engagement or community platform. I'm just curious what your response or reaction was to that at the time, or now re-looking at that data. And do you think we'll see any different results when we run that study again later this year?
I hope we'll see different results. What's funny is last week I was talking with somebody even before you reminded me about this data point, and they said, "What do you think the adoption rate is?" And I said, "Probably about 30%." So I was when I opened up our prep document, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot about that data point." Maybe that's why I had it in my head. But I mean, I think, look, that's one of our big opportunities as a company is we have to educate people on the power. Like, why is community something that you should be investing in as a business, right? Why is that a priority? So I do think it'll bump up this year. I think it'll still be very low. Today, you know, having a community is forward-thinking companies do it, and it's a differentiator for them. But I think you fast forward 12, 24 months, it's going to be not only a differentiator, it's going to be sort of a requirement to enter and really play in a market. Is you're going to have that, because customers want to see that they're going to be able to get support from your business, whether that comes from your support team, yes, but also from the people who are practitioners around it. They want to see that community engage with your brand. And if you can show them that in the sales cycle, I think you have a better chance of winning those deals than if you can't show that. I would also say, of the 30% of companies that do have communities, keep in mind, they're probably started in one of these use case areas, right? Probably support. So I think there's opportunity to go to their partner teams, their onboarding teams, their customer success teams for best practices. There's so many opportunities to just continue to expand what they're doing. So for us, that number is low today, and I hate to see that, but I'm very bullish that companies are catching the wave on this, and it's going to expand rapidly. So I think it'll be higher this year. I expect next year it'll be much higher, if we have anything to do with it, of course.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder, you know, to your point about how different departments can be using the platform, you know, our survey respondents were customer success leaders specifically. Yeah. So I wonder if some of them said no, even if other departments within their company were using it.
That's right.
I don't know the answer, but
like that education team that came up to us at TSIA, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just like it.
And here's another data point I just found the other day, and we didn't prep you for this one, Jay, so forgive us. Boston Consulting Group reported, I think it was last year, that 45% of the time spent by customers when they call into support is silent time. So 55% of the time is actually interaction. 45% of the time is when the agent's just typing in, looking for search, blah, 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 finding the answer. That's a lot of time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the communities are at the stage where we can measure productivity gained by utilizing communities. Is that fair to say, or do you have research?
Well, we actually do have research that shows, and every company sort of has to tune this for themselves, but there is research that shows it's not about the productivity on the calls, of course.
No.
It's about preventing the calls from even happening in the first place, right? So that's where the productivity gains come in. I call it reducing cost to serve. Cost to serve is a metric that I've looked at as a SaaS executive for years, which is basically, number of cases divided by the cost of my support team, right? Or sorry, the other way around. And what you want to try to do is you want to bring that down. So if you have fewer cases coming in, then you can do more strategic things with those resources. You don't have to spend those resources in that area. Notice I didn't say reduce them. I just said reallocate them. That's a whole different topic we can talk about more some other time, maybe a different fireside chat. But yeah, so it doesn't surprise me, but it also speaks to me in a big way, Peter, because I used to think it was, millennials and I don't know, what am I, Generation X, something like that we didn't really want to get on the phone. But really in this day and age, who wants to get on the phone and waste 45% of the time waiting for somebody to come back to you with an answer? Like, what if you could just search Google? Like, that's the other thing you should look for in a community, especially if you have a support use case. I want to be able to search Google for that, right? And have your community come up with the answer. You see that a lot in B2C scenarios, but increasingly high volume B2B scenarios, you're seeing that too. So you can go to the community, you have a great experience. You can search Google, you can have a great experience, and you avoid that whole phone call altogether. That's my personal preference. Some people like to do the phone call thing, and I don't begrudge that at all. But for me, I'll take the 0% time on the phone.
Marty, can I ask a follow-on question?
Yeah.
Just on that? It's around manageability. Then you talked about the scale and really having the community answer the questions and all that kind of stuff, and really talks to productivity and efficiencies. What about as the vendor then? How do you approach managing that, the kind of the conversations?
Yeah. So a good community is going to have a community manager or have somebody that's assigned to do that work with the community. So any community worth its salt is going to have strong moderation tools, and moderation tools allow you to look out for bad actors. They allow you to look out for rogue conversations and shut them down. One of the things that a good moderator, community manager will do is actually make sure that everybody gets their question answered in a timely fashion. One of the things that our customers often do is in a support community scenario we do this ourselves, right? We have a Slack channel with everybody that can answer every single question that you could ever have about our products. We've got a Slack channel. We make sure our community manager will make sure that somebody is on tap to answer that question if it's not been answered. But what we want to do is give that question about anywhere from 24 to 36 hours to sit a little bit in the community and help other people, again, let them step up and shine, help answer those questions. And if they don't, of course, we're going to step in and make sure that question gets answered. But there are tools built into Higher Logic Vanilla, at least, that will allow you to keep an eye on unanswered questions, moderate the conversations, and take some of that workload off of you so that one person doing community management and moderation work can actually go pretty far. Some platforms like ours even allow you to delegate and make deputies out of other folks in the community who are your highest level ambassadors and MVPs in the community to help you with that moderation. So there's a range of strategies that you can deploy there. It's a good
Very
question.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jay, I want to go back, ties into what you were talking about with cost to serve, but I want to go back to something you said earlier about scalability, right? And that what you were talking about was just absolute music to my ears, because to me, obviously we talk about scalability a lot in customer success, but to me personally, I hear scalability, I hear what I call digital customer success, others call tech touch, digital-led customer marketing, right? I don't care what you call it, but we're talking about one-to-many interactions here, right?
Yep.
And I think community can be a huge driver and enabler of that digital engagement and that scale, but I don't always think it's what comes to people's minds first when they start thinking about those things. I'm curious if you have the same assessment and why you think that is, and how CS leaders should maybe start to shift their thinking there, because I think it's time for a shift.
Yeah, well, I would agree. the first thing that comes to mind is a CS platform like Churn Zero or like Catalyst, right? So, and that's all good. That's the first solution that really has been in the market for customer success teams. And they do great things. They aggregate data, they provide visibility into the customer. They help you orchestrate the customer journey. They enable mass communications with your customers. They drive high touch CSM interactions, a whole range of things that need to happen there. But there's something that they don't do, which is drive peer-to-peer engagement across the customer base, right? Collaboration. And so we need collaboration at scale, just like we need automation and all those other areas at scale, because that helps you keep your business human, right? We all want our customers to feel like they have really strong human connections in and around our brand. That's a piece of it. So, that piece for me is just a critical part of the scale story. But I think these two solutions together, they make a lot of sense. One of the things that we see customers doing in our world is you use the customer success platform to help determine what stage the customer is in. The CRM data will help tell you what industry they're in, what part of the audience they're part of. Are they an executive? Are they a user? Like, what is it how are they interacting with your company? And then you can use that to drive what they actually see in the community, which is a really cool use case. If somebody's in onboarding and they come to the community, then they're going to see onboarding specific content and discussions and groups that they can join to help them do that part of the journey really well. So I think the two play together really well. But you're right, we do need to get people thinking about community solutions as part of the customer success stack in general.
Yeah, and I think that human element is super important, because I talk about this all the time. That's what CS leaders are afraid of losing when they start going down that digital or scaled, or again, whatever term you want to use, path, right? Yeah. They're afraid of losing those human connections, those relationships their CSMs have built, all of that. That's the part that's scary. So I think it's really important to stop and be like, hey, this is a way to keep that and do it at scale, right?
Yeah. That's why I've talked about this before publicly, but I hate the term tech touch, because it's not like, I don't want to be touched by your technology. No. I feel violated. I want, if anything, I want scaled human touch. Right. And, I think what we also, maybe back to Peter's question on misconceptions, we believe that human touch has to come from employees of our organization. Well, what if we're just a facilitator of getting you connected with another human that really knows what you're going through and can swap notes with you? That'd be a huge win.
Which can also almost be more valuable in many cases. So
yeah. Because it takes away that sense of selling that we talked about earlier too, right?
Yeah.
There's none of that going on in peer-to-peer.
A neutral party. So Jay, what are your thoughts on for customer success leaders? I'm thinking like more executive level, to think about communities, because I think traditionally, or maybe historically, communities have been seen as like a bolt-on adjunct piece of customer success and not so much part of the core. I think otherwise. Obviously you do too, and Marley. But what kind of guidance would you give senior leaders to evolve their own thinking and help their teams to evolve in that way?
Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit to what we talked about earlier, which is just flip everything on its head as a starting point. And y'all are really good at this at ESG. You don't start with adding people, right? You don't start with hiring a bunch of CSMs. It was actually, I made a post about it. I don't know when it was, yesterday, maybe this morning, about Carlos at HPE, right?
So
they didn't have any CSMs at the beginning. I remember when he first started working with you all, and it was all about getting the technology, the scaled piece in place so that you could communicate effectively with everyone. You knew what stage they were in, and then you start layering in the human touch on top of it. So just, I would say, think less linearly. If you're a leader, like try to think more scale from the start and then layer in the humans. So the example of having a call with a cohort of customers at the same time who have the same problem. You don't need a platform. You don't need any, just you can get started. You have Zoom. We all know you have Zoom because Marley's husband sold it to you. So, but use Zoom, use your email list, and just go, and then refine. So the other thing I think we do a lot as leaders is we want the perfect plan. We want to build it all out, and then we want to go execute it. Well, I can tell you when we built Gain, Grow, Retain, that is not how it worked. We said, hey, people are asking a lot of crazy questions. Why don't we just get everybody on a call and see where it goes? We did a panel discussion. I don't know if you remember the very first call. It was a panel discussion.
Yeah.
It was a perfectly fine way to start. Then we asked for feedback after we did it. We sent out a survey, just a short survey, NPS, and what would you do differently next time? People said, we want to talk more. So we said, okay, well, then we're just going to facilitate it and let people talk. And so I think don't overthink community. It's a concept that you can apply across every aspect of things. Now, in terms of thinking bigger picture and really thinking about scale, you got to think about a business metric that you can tie to if you're going to go spend money on it.
That's right.
Right. So what do you expect to gain? I always start with increase in gross retention, increase in net retention, increase in bookings, which will always speak to an executive team. For later stage companies that are more profit conscious, and I'm venturing to guess that everybody's about to get more profit conscious, then reducing cost to serve becomes an interesting business metric to hang on to. So I think that's the other thing, Peter, is like finding the thing that you believe can make the biggest impact, starting small, proving that impact, and then growing it from there. Not dissimilar from what you all do with a customer success platform.
Great answer. Thank you.
Indeed.
There's a lot of words. I don't know if it was great. But...
I heard ESG in there.
It was great. Okay, so earlier we talked about what best in class looks like from the perspective of who owns community, but I want to go beyond that. What are those best in breed companies doing with community? What benefits are they seeing? What does that look like? Paint us a pretty picture of like, this is the ultimate version of what your community could look like.
Okay, I'm going to do better than just paint a picture with 1,000 words. I'm going to just give you a picture. If everybody keep listening to me while I talk, but go to community.smartsheet.com. Okay, this is a best in breed community. Everybody maybe knows what Smartsheet is. Community.smartsheet.com. What they have done is they've incorporated all of their teams. They have product announcements in there. They have access to the support knowledge base. They can escalate cases out of that platform directly into their support system. They have resources for onboarding customers. They have best practices and ongoing discussions. Smartsheet's a horizontal kind of product, which means they serve a lot of different industries. So there's different industry groups that you can go join discussions on and see the kinds of problems that people are solving with their product. So they've segmented subgroups, a lot of different places that you can engage by role, by industry, by journey stage, by public and private discussions. They have both, right? So that's best in class from an audience engagement perspective. Then what you'll also notice if you look across the top, and I hope everybody's still listening to me here, they haven't gotten too in depth into the Smartsheet community. It's integrated SSO, their learning management system, their support ticket system, the community itself, one login, right? Their product, it's the same login. Learning management's integrated, knowledge base, blogs and content are integrated in there. In Gain, Grow, Retain, which is another example. If you haven't signed up for that one right now, I'll do the plug if that's okay.
Please do.
GainGrowRetain.com. That community also runs on Higher Logic Vanilla, and you'll see all the resources we've integrated in. Podcast is in there. So it's about integrating not only the technology, but the audiences together and subgrouping them into ways that they can, go get to the place that they need to find the answer that they're looking for. Product teams are using ideation module within this platform and others to harvest those good ideas and help customers see what else is out there when they need to be thinking out about letting them upvote, downvote product ideas so that you get the voice of the customer involved in how product is making decisions. So it's really, it's really an integrated story, which is what we love to tell in customer success, right? Customer success isn't a team. It's a company strategy. It's a culture. It's a way we act across all the different departments so that we can drive outcomes for the customer. Community is really it's a subtext under that to help drive it. So But anyway, I like that example, and hopefully other folks will too. We have others as well.
I think that's a stellar example. And it's not my experience. I've been in many companies where we've had communities, and where the companies tripped up, I felt, was in people didn't know who should take ownership of some particular kind of question or action that gets generated. Product would often point to customer success and vice versa, and support and all that stuff. So maybe Smartsheets figured that backbone out and has built the right kind of process to make that feel very seamless for the users. Yeah. I'm not asking a question, Jay. I'm just kind of throwing that.
No, it's a good point. It's this ownership thing. I would say first answer the question, right? Just make sure the customer or the user gets the question answered.
Somebody answer the question.
Answer the question. And then after the fact, like refine your process, right? So whoever is that community management, whether they live under marketing or the CCO, doesn't matter, but somebody owns the process of saying, okay, who should be answering these questions if the customer, if the peers aren't answering them? And like, let's get some alignment and agreement on that so that we're not having a fight about it. Right. So yeah, it's a good point.
And I think those two examples, of course, please plug Gain, Grow, Retain because we love it and it's amazing. But I think it's interesting, those two examples, right? Because one is an industry community.
Yep.
And the other is, a product community.
That's right.
Right. So I think it's important to look at those two types of examples as well, because I think there are lessons to be learned regardless of what kind of community you're building. There are probably lessons to be learned from both.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, we have a ton of audience questions that we still have to answer. And if you still have a question out there, please pop it in the Q&A tab so we can get to as many as we can. But before we get to those, I have one last question for you, Jay. And that is, I hope everyone watching us right now is wondering this, but what's your best advice if someone is listening and they say, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to go and start a customer community. And I will add a part to my question that is from the audience, from Rachel. How do you offer value right out of the gate if you're doing that, if you're building it from scratch?
Well, one way you can offer value right out of the gate is, remember, community doesn't have to be a big platform. It doesn't have to be a big technology implementation on day one. It's just getting the right people together. So one of the things that you can do, take one of your best product experts who is the most, customer facing person that you have and bring them into a room and say, hey, we're going to do, tooltip Thursday, right? And just have them start talking. You will automatically build loyalty in the people that you bring into that room. They can become your seed group for something bigger, right? It's just like we did with Gain, Grow, Retain. We brought, 50 of the smartest people we could find on LinkedIn. They all came together miraculously, in the first weeks of Gain, Grow, Retain, or the pandemic, right? And before you knew it, they were providing the value. And so I think if you can gather people together, that's the best way to start a monthly call, start a weekly call, start a small roundtable series. Don't wait to start embracing your community. The whole title of this thing is you already have it, just embrace it, right? As you do that, let them pull out from you what they want to do next. Will they engage online? Ask them a question. If they will, then you need to start looking into an online platform to help bring that together. As you do that, then you can also look for ways to unify the customer experience by connecting the learning platform, the knowledge base, the support system, like we've talked about. So I would say don't overthink it. Start small, and then when you're ready, come talk to our Logic Vanilla. We can help you understand what the steps are to implement the technology behind it when you're ready for it. So
cool.
Yeah. Start somewhere, right? I think that's true in almost anything and everything we talk about in customer success, right? Customer success as an industry is so new. There's so much changing all the time. There's always new trends and new exciting things and all of these things that CS leaders hear about and their eyes light up and they want to try. And then they're like, oh God, that sounds like a lot of work. Yeah. Whatever it is, I think the answer is like, try a little thing. Start with something.
Show some momentum.
And call ESG, but
yeah. But no, it's like show some success and then show how you'd like to build on that success. Right. And I think, any function, any part of a business has has, that challenge. It's not just customer success. We all have to do that with every part of our companies. So, yeah.
True.
I want to ask an audience question too, and it's, for me, it's really loaded. It could be huge or it could be a really simple answer. Why do you think people are not joining communities? And I think what they mean by people is, I'm imagining it's individuals who are not joining the communities that are available to them.
Well, I mean, so I guess maybe to refine the question, if your community, if people are not joining your community, why aren't they joining?
Yeah.
Do they know about it? Are you offering them any value by joining it? Or do you just want them in your community to say you have them in your community? But what are they going to get out of it? Right? I mean, we could all ask each other the same thing. Like, if you're not in Gangrel Retain, then we probably haven't shown you anything that would be of value to you yet. So
but I guess some people also may see community as a public platform that they're not comfortable engaging in.
Yeah.
Are there tactics or strategies you could recommend to draw those people out who probably have valuable ideas to share?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So there's a challenge that exists in every community, in that probably 10% of the members of that community are the ones that actually contribute to it. Right. Yeah. A lot of people read, but that's okay. I think that's the answer, Peter, is make it okay for people just to come in and get value. I have people all the time that tell me, like, hey, I know I'm not real active in the community, but I do come in and read what's on Gangrel Retain. I'm like, that's great. You're getting value. Like, do it all day long. If you find something, somebody asks a question that you have some particular knowledge about, answer it publicly. If you don't feel comfortable with that, hit them on LinkedIn, give them a DM. Right. So I empathize with that, because not everybody is, like, some of us are super comfortable being, public, but other people aren't, and that's okay. So just let them receive the value instead of asking them to give it.
I love that answer. I mean, that's really multi-dimensional kind of value from the community, for the community. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Michelle in the audience made a great point. Sometimes people are afraid of not being seen as an expert, right? And so, maybe they're going to come in and read and learn. And that doesn't mean that they're not part of the community just because they're not commenting, right? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They're an important part of it. Let me say this too, and this is not to change anybody's mind or feeling about that, but everybody listening to this call, you have unique experiences that people, you're seeing unique things. You're seeing, I keep repeating myself, you have experiences that are valuable to somebody, right? And if you're working in a SaaS company, you're experiencing things right now that other people on this call even would get a lot of value from, if you talked about it either publicly or in private with them. So don't underestimate what you know either, is what I would say. Absolutely. Because if you wait till you think you know enough to contribute, you'll never get there. Because
especially in customer success.
Especially in customer success. That's right. So, but that's not to change anybody's mind or heart, but just my personal belief.
Yeah. All right. I think this audience question is particularly interesting because of an experience I have had recently. So I'm going to tell my story first, and then I'm going to actually ask you the question, Jay. So I posted about this on LinkedIn recently. I deleted ESG's Facebook page recently. And to some marketers out there, if there's anyone who's lived a past life in marketing, that might sound like a cardinal sin, right? But it was the right decision for our business. And so it reminds me of that experience, because this question from an anonymous attendee is that they noticed that Gangrel Retain does not have a page on Facebook. And they're wondering what your thoughts are on having both a standalone online platform and a Facebook page. Because, like you said, LinkedIn can be a community, similarly, Facebook can be a similar scenario. So talk about that. I'm curious your thoughts.
This is a super question. We hear it all the time. So there's a couple different angles on it. If you're a product company, the question is, do you want to have some ownership and ability to moderate and engage with all those back-end tools with the community or not? I have worked with different software companies that have more of a B2C feel to them, that have very vibrant Facebook communities, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But for most B2B use cases, the company tends to want to have a little bit more engagement and control over guiding the discussion where it needs to go. So that's question number, or sort of answer number one. Answer number two, and it's a good feedback, because I don't think we've ever considered having a GGR Facebook page, but just you asking that question is me learning. So now I'm thinking, well, maybe we should have a Facebook page. But I can tell you this, your choice of which social media platforms to use are really based on who your target audience is and where they live. Most of Gangrel Retain's target audience is already on LinkedIn, but don't think Jeff and I haven't had conversations about TikTok and other places. Like, you're probably not going to see me dancing on TikTok or do anything like that anytime soon.
I don't know. I would pay good money to see you do a TikTok dance, Jay.
Well, it's going to be really good money. It's going to be really good money for that to happen. But I mean, I know other people in the B2B world who are doing a lot on TikTok, and they're not dancing. They're actually, it's just, they're entertaining, but also providing really good value.
It can be effective. Yeah.
Super effective. So go to where your audience is in terms of which channels you choose. It goes back to that whole idea of being multi-channel. Use email too, right? Use billboards, like engage people wherever you can get their attention, wherever they are, and you can get their attention. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's exactly what I would say. The platform you want to use, the social media platform you choose to use as a business, all goes back to where your audience is, right? Meet them where they are. Don't make them come to you. You go to them.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because we know people are there, and we can draw them back in to the community where we can cultivate higher quality conversations in the long run. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Peter, do you have a last question for Jay before we wrap up?
I'm just fascinated by the guitar behind his head, and I'm just can't get this image out of my head of him on TikTok doing something. No, I don't think I have a question. I think we covered a lot of ground here that should hopefully help the audience appreciate that. In my mind, communities need to be part of your core business model for customer success. But I also want to say, and maybe you have a thought on this, Jay, it forces the conversation even more that you need to work with your peer organizations. Even if you own the community, you're going to be forced into driving more engagement across your company, which ultimately should benefit your customers.
Yeah. It's a great point to end on, and I won't belabor it too much, but this is a team sport. It takes a lot of different skill sets to make a SaaS customer successful. So couldn't have said it better myself, Peter.
Well, on that note, I think that is a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. Jay, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jay.
Always is. Yep.
I hope everyone who joined us learned something, took an idea or a concept or a thought away that they can go implement tomorrow, and appreciate everyone joining us. Reminder, everybody, you'll receive a recording of this session within 24 hours, and I hope to see you all back next month for our next Customer Success Unlocked. Thank you all.
Thanks, Marley. Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
See you.